The first time I realized the joke had gone too far, I was standing in the copy room with a stack of reports in my hands, laughing along like I always did, while my stomach quietly dropped. It started as nothing. Just jokes. Office jokes. The kind you're supposed to brush off if you don't want to be labeled that guy. Chad was the kind of coworker everyone noticed. Loud without being annoying. Confident without trying too hard. Tall, broad-shouldered, always rolling up his sleeves like he knew exactly what it did to people. Especially me. From day one, he zeroed in on me. Careful, he'd say with a grin whenever I walked past his desk, "You're gonna distract me like that." Or, "Man, if I weren't straight," followed by a laugh and a quick glance in my direction like he was checking my reaction. Everyone laughed. Including me. That was the rule, right? You laugh, you keep things light, you don't make it weird. So I did. I told myself it was harmless, that Chad joked like that with everyone. That it didn't mean anything, except he didn't joke like that with everyone. Just me. We worked in the same department, sat 2 rows apart, and somehow always ended up assigned to the same projects. Late meetings, shared deadlines, coffee runs. The usual corporate bonding stuff. And the more time we spent around each other, the more the jokes shifted. Became more specific, more personal. "You're too quiet," he told me once during a team lunch. "Makes me curious what you're thinking," I shrugged. "Probably just trying to survive this job." He leaned closer than necessary. Liar. I felt that one in my chest. Still, I played it cool. I was out at work, but I wasn't that out. I didn't flirt with coworkers, I didn't blur lines. I especially didn't flirt with straight guys who treated everything like a punchline. Chad was married. Or engaged. Or something like that. He mentioned a girlfriend once. Maybe twice. The details were always fuzzy, like he didn't care enough to keep the story straight. And then there was the touching. Nothing obvious. Just a hand on my shoulder when he laughed. A brush past my arm when there was plenty of space. Standing too close when he explained something on my screen, his voice low, warm, right by my ear. "You smell good," he said once, casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I froze. He smirked. "Relax, I'm kidding." Of course he was. I told myself not to read into it, that I was projecting, that I was starved for attention and imagining things. But my body didn't get the memo. My pulse always jumped when he was near. My brain short-circuited every time he looked at me just a second too long. The others noticed too. "You two have a weird vibe," one of my coworkers joked after a meeting. "Like an old married couple." Chad laughed. "Careful, you'll make him blush." I did. The line between joking and something else blurred so slowly I didn't even see it happening. Not until that afternoon in the copy room. The machine jammed, like it always did. I was already annoyed, already tired, already counting down the minutes until I could go home and stop pretending I wasn't affected by any of this. Chad walked in behind me and shut the door. I didn't think much of it. People did that all the time to block the noise. But then he leaned against the counter, instead of helping, arms crossed, watching me struggle with the machine. "You know," he said, "if this were a movie, this is where I'd suddenly appear right behind you." I laughed automatically. Too fast. Too loud. "Dude," I said, shaking my head. "You're ridiculous." He didn't laugh back. Instead, he stepped closer. "So tell me." He said, voice lower now, no audience, no coworkers around. "Does that kind of joke actually bother you? Or do you secretly like it?" That was the moment. The air shifted. The joke stopped being a joke. And for the first time since I'd met him, I couldn't tell if Chad was still pretending. I swallowed, my heart pounding, and realized I had no idea how to answer. And whatever was about to happen next, I was pretty sure it was going to change everything. I didn't answer him right away. The copy machine whirred back to life, papers sliding out like nothing tense or loaded had just been said. My hands felt clumsy, like they didn't belong to me anymore. Chad watched me closely, not smiling, not joking, just waiting. "I think you enjoy messing with people," I finally said, keeping my eyes on the stack of paper. "That's your thing," he hummed, unconvinced. "Maybe, but I don't mess with everyone." That made my chest tighten. I turned to face him then, forcing myself to hold his gaze. Up close, he was even more distracting. Green eyes, light stubble, that faint, clean scent I'd noticed before but never let myself think about too hard. "Chad," I said carefully, "we're at work." Something flashed across his face. Not annoyance. Not embarrassment. Interest. That didn't answer my question. He replied. For a split second, I considered lying, saying it bothered me, saying it made me uncomfortable. That would have been the responsible thing to do. The clean thing. Instead, I exhaled slowly and said, "I think you like knowing you can get a reaction out of me." His mouth curved into a slow grin. There it is. The door opened then. Someone walked in, killed the moment instantly. Chad stepped back like nothing had happened, grabbing his copies, slipping right back into his usual easy confidence. "See you at the meeting?" he said, winking as he walked out. I stood there for a full minute after he left, heart racing, replaying every word. I told myself I'd imagine the intensity, that I was overthinking it again. But after that day, the joke stopped being casual altogether. Chad started finding excuses to be alone with me, asking for help with things he didn't need help with, volunteering to stay late when I did, sitting beside me in meetings when there were plenty of other seats. And the way he looked at me changed. It wasn't playful anymore. It was focused. Like he was studying me, daring me to flinch. One night, we were the last two in the office. The lights dimmed automatically at a certain hour, leaving everything bathed in that quiet after-hours glow. The city hummed outside the windows. "You hungry?" he asked, spinning in his chair. "I'm ordering food." I should have said no. I didn't. We ate at our desks, talking about nothing important. Music. Bad bosses. How neither of us thought we'd still be in this job this long. "You ever feel like you're pretending all day?" he asked suddenly. I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Like you play a version of yourself everyone expects." I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, all the time." He studied me again, quieter now. "You don't do that with me." The words sat heavy between us. Before I could respond, he stood up, walked over, leaned against my desk the same way he always did. But this time, he didn't keep his distance. "You know," he said softly, "I started joking with you because I thought you'd shut me down." I swallowed. "Why would I do that?" "Because you're smart, and you see through bullshit." His eyes dropped, just briefly, to my mouth. "Turns out you didn't." The air felt thick, charged. Every instinct screamed that this was crossing a line, but my body was already ahead of my brain. "Chad," I murmured, "what are you doing?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he smiled. Not cocky, not teasing. Nervous. Almost uncertain. "I think," he said slowly, "one of my jokes stopped being a joke a while ago." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. "And?" I asked. He leaned in just a fraction closer. Close enough that I could feel his warmth. "And I don't know what happens if I keep going." I met his gaze, every rational thought screaming at me to pull away. But I didn't. And that was the moment I realized, whatever this was between us, I was already in too deep. After that night, everything changed, without anything actually happening, which somehow made it worse. Chad didn't touch me. Didn't say anything outright. But the tension followed us everywhere, like a live wire stretched tight between our desks. In meetings, his knee brushed mine under the table and stayed there a beat too long. In the hallway, he'd lean in close to say something pointless, his voice dropping like it was a secret meant only for me. And every time someone walked by, he snapped right back into normal, like he hadn't just been burning a hole through me with his eyes. I started sleeping like crap, overthinking every interaction, replaying that moment in the office over and over. His almost nervous smile, the way he admitted one of his jokes, stopped being a joke. I told myself he was just flirting for attention. That straight guys did that sometimes. That I was being stupid for hoping it meant more. Then came the team off-site. 2 days. One hotel. Way too much alcohol. By the time we checked in, everyone was already buzzing. The conference center was attached to the hotel bar, and within an hour, half the team was there, loosening ties, laughing too loud. Chad found me almost immediately. "Drink?" he asked, holding out a beer. "Sure," I said, taking it. We ended up at a small table in the corner, just the two of us, watching our coworkers slowly unravel. His knee pressed against mine again. This time I didn't move away. So he said casually, "You ever think about what people would say if they knew half the stuff you think?" I snorted. "They'd probably HR me into oblivion." He laughed, then leaned closer. "What about me? What about you? What do you think about me?" There it was. No joke this time. No punchline. I hesitated, then said quietly, "I think you know." His jaw tightened just slightly. "Say it." The bar noise faded into the background. My heart hammered. "I think," I said, choosing my words carefully, "that you enjoy crossing lines you pretend don't exist." His mouth twitched. "And you?" "I think I let you." That did it. Something shifted in his expression, like a switch flipping from playful to serious. He downed the rest of his beer and stood. "Come with me," he said. I blinked. "Where?" "Outside. I need air." Every sane part of me said don't. This was a bad idea, stacked on top of a worse one. Coworkers. Alcohol. A hotel full of thin walls and bad decisions. I stood anyway. We didn't go far. Just around the side of the building, where the noise dulled and the night air was cool against my flushed skin. He paced once, then stopped in front of me. "I'm not good at this," he said abruptly. "At joking?" I asked softly. "At wanting something I shouldn't." My chest tightened. "Chad," he cut me off. "Do you know how hard it is to joke about wanting you when I'm trying not to want you?" That landed hard. I stared at him, pulse roaring in my ears. "Then why do it?" "Because you never shut me down," he said. "Because you look at me like you're waiting for me to stop pretending." Silence stretched between us. "You're married," I said quietly. He laughed once, bitter. "Separated. Has been for a while. Office just doesn't need the update." I searched his face, trying to find the joke. There wasn't one. "I crossed a line," he said. "I know that. I kept pushing because I wanted to see if you'd push back." "And if I don't?" I asked. His eyes locked on mine. "Then I don't know if I can stop." The honesty in his voice sent a shiver through me. Before I could think better of it, I said, "Then don't joke about it anymore." He frowned. "What?" "If you want something," I continued, heart pounding, "say it straight or leave me alone." He held my gaze for a long moment. "I want you," he said. No humor, no wink, just truth. My breath caught. "And that," he added softly, "scares the hell out of me." We stood there, inches apart, neither of us moving, the tension thick enough to choke on. Behind us, laughter spilled out from the bar. Real life. Consequences. Reality. Waiting to crash in. But in that moment, all I could think was how far we'd already gone, and how one more step would make it impossible to go back. Neither of us moved. The night air felt colder suddenly, like my body had finally caught up to what my brain was screaming. Chad stood there, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders tense. No cocky grin, no jokes to hide behind, just a man who'd said something he couldn't take back. "I shouldn't have said that," he muttered. "But you did," I replied. He nodded once. "Yeah." We stood there a moment longer, the weight of it settling between us. Then a group of coworkers spilled out the side door laughing, completely oblivious. Chad took a step back instinctively, putting space between us again. "Tonight ends here," he said quietly. "It has to." I hated how relieved part of me felt, and how disappointed the rest of me was. Back inside, everything snapped back into place. Noise, smiles, drinks. Chad joked with everyone like usual, loud and easy, while I nursed my beer and tried not to watch him from across the room. But the damage was done. The next Monday at work felt surreal. Chad was professional, polite, friendly in the way you'd be with anyone else. No lingering touches, no low-voiced comments, no looks that made my pulse spike. I told myself this was good, healthy, necessary. And yet, every time he didn't look at me, it felt like a loss. By Wednesday, it was unbearable. We were both staying late again. Of course we were. The office empty, lights dimmed. I tried to focus on my screen, but my eyes kept drifting to his reflection in the dark glass of the window. Finally, I stood. "Can we talk?" I asked. He looked up slowly, like he'd been expecting this. "About?" "You know about." He hesitated, then nodded. Conference room. The door clicked shut behind us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I meant what I said." He began. "About stopping." "I know," I said, "and I respected that, but you don't get to drop something like that on me and then pretend nothing happened." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I'm trying to do the right thing." "For who?" I asked. "You or me? That's not fair." "Neither was months of." Joking. I shot back, then softened. "I need clarity, Chad, not tension." He met my eyes, something raw there. The truth? Yes. I crossed a line because I was lonely. He admitted. "Because you saw me when everything else in my life felt like noise. And because you never flinched." My chest tightened. "But this," he continued, gesturing between us, "is messy. We work together. You deserve someone who isn't half a disaster." I took a step closer. "I deserve honesty." He laughed quietly. "You're really bad for my self-control, you know that?" I smiled despite myself. "You started it." Silence again. Heavy. Electric. "I'm not asking you to blow up your life," I said. "I just need to know if what you said outside that bar was real or just another joke that went too far." He didn't answer immediately. Then softly, "It was real." That answer settled something in me. "Okay," I said. "Then here's my line." He tensed. "Go on. Number more flirting at work. No late night almosts. Either we keep this professional and bury it, or we acknowledge it and take it slow. Outside this place." His eyes searched mine. "You'd really be okay with that risk?" I'd be okay not wondering anymore. He let out a long breath, like he'd been holding it for weeks. "Coffee," he said finally. "Tomorrow, somewhere far from the office." I nodded. "Coffee." Nothing dramatic happened after that. No touching, no kiss. Just an understanding. Fragile, but real. As we walked out together, side by side but not quite close enough to brush arms, I realized something. The joke hadn't gone too far that night in the copy room. The joke had been pretending it was ever just a joke at all. Coffee turned into the most nerve-wracking 30 minutes of my adult life. I got there early, mostly so I wouldn't have to walk in and scan the room for him. I chose a corner table, something quiet, neutral, not a date, just coffee. That's what I kept telling myself. Chad showed up 5 minutes late, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like always. When he spotted me, he slowed, just a fraction, like he was bracing himself. "Hey," he said, "hey." That was it, no hug, no awkward joke. Just two people sitting down with a lot of history they weren't supposed to have. For a while, we talked about safe things. The coffee was terrible. The weather, work, but vaguely, carefully. It felt almost strange seeing him outside the office without the performance, without the constant edge of humor. "You're quieter than I expected," I said finally. He gave a half smile. "I don't actually talk this much. I just hide behind it." I nodded. I figured. There was a pause, heavier than the others. I meant what I said. He told me. About taking it slow. About not messing this up. Messing what up? I asked. He met my eyes. You. Something about the way he said it. Simple, direct, hit harder than any of the flirting ever had. "I don't want to be your experiment," I said quietly. I know, he replied immediately. And I'm not confused about what I want. I'm confused about the timing. That felt honest. Uncomfortable, but honest. We talked longer than we meant to. About his separation. About how lonely he'd been even before it fell apart. About how joking was easier than admitting he cared. I crossed the line because you felt safe, he admitted. Which is messed up, I know. It is, I said. But I also let it happen. He looked at me carefully. Do you regret that? I thought about it. No, I said, but I don't want to live in that gray space anymore. Me neither. When we stood to leave, there was a moment, right there by the door, where it would have been so easy to lean in. To finally close the distance that had been haunting us for months. He didn't. Instead, he stepped back slightly, gave me a real smile. I'll see you at work, he said. Yeah, work, somehow, got easier after that. The tension shifted. It didn't disappear, but it stopped feeling like a secret waiting to explode. We respected the boundaries we'd set. No touching. No looks that lingered too long. If anything, the restraint made everything else feel sharper. 2 weeks passed. Then one Friday afternoon, Chad stopped by my desk. Still free tonight? He asked. I looked up. Depends. What are you suggesting? Dinner, he said. Not a joke. Not a maybe. Just dinner. I felt my chest tighten. In a good way this time. Okay, I said. Dinner. That night was different. No coworkers. No alcohol-fueled tension. Just us, sitting across from each other, learning who the other actually was, without the safety net of flirting. At the end of the night, standing outside my building, the moment finally came. I'm allowed to do this now, right? He asked softly. I nodded. When he kissed me, it wasn't rushed or desperate. It was careful, intentional, like he was making sure it was real. And it was. As he pulled back, forehead resting against mine, he laughed quietly. So, he said, turns out the joke really did go too far. I smiled. Yeah, but I don't think either of us is laughing anymore. Dating Chad felt surreal at first, like we were playing roles we hadn't rehearsed. At work, nothing changed on the surface. Same meetings. Same deadlines. Same inside jokes with the rest of the team. If anyone noticed the shift between us, they didn't say anything. We were careful. Almost too careful. Outside the office, though, it was different. Chad wasn't the loud, joking guy the first knew from work. He was attentive, thoughtful, nervous in a way that caught me off guard. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. Remembered small things. Texted good morning like it mattered. One night, about a month in, we were lying on his couch, legs tangled, some movie playing neither of us was watching. You know what's funny, he said. I hummed. You? Always. He smiled faintly. I was so sure I had everything figured out. Marriage, career, who I was supposed to be. He glanced at me. Then you came along, and I realized how much of that was just noise. I rested my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I didn't mean to blow up your life. I know, he said softly. I did that on my own. There were hard moments, too. Awkward conversations. The fear of being seen together by coworkers. The reality of his separation paperwork dragging on longer than either of us wanted. Once, after a rough day, he snapped, maybe this was a mistake. The words stung, but he apologized immediately. Owned it. Didn't joke his way out of it. That mattered. The real test came when a rumor started. Nothing specific. Just whispers. Lingering looks. A coworker asking me, a little too casually, if Chad and I were close. I told Chad that night. He went quiet for a long moment. If this becomes a problem for you, he said finally, I'll step back. I won't let this hurt your job. I looked at him. Really looked at him. No, I said. If it becomes a problem, we face it together. I'm not your secret. He nodded slowly. Okay. Weeks later, HR called him in. Routine, apparently. Someone had noticed a change in dynamics. No accusations. Just a reminder about professionalism. We'd already been careful. It passed. What stayed with me was how shaken Chad looked afterward. That night, he held me tighter than usual. I spent so long joking because it was safer than being honest. He said into my hair, "I don't want to do that anymore. Not with you." "You don't," I replied. "That's the point." Months passed. His divorce finalized. We stopped sneaking around. Eventually, we told a few people at work, not making a big announcement, just not hiding either. The world didn't end, and one evening, sitting back in that same coffee shop where it had all started, Chad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know," he said, smiling, "I really was an asshole at first." I laughed. "You really were, but," he added, "I'm glad you called me out instead of laughing it off. So am I. Because here's the thing I learned from all of it. Sometimes the joke goes too far not because it's offensive, but because it's honest. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop laughing and ask what it really means. I used to think the story ended with the kiss outside my apartment. Or maybe with HR not calling us back in. Or with Chad finally updating his desk photo from a stock landscape to something that actually meant something to him. Turns out, it didn't end there. It kept going, in smaller, quieter ways. Like the first time we walked into a work happy hour together and no one made a big deal out of it. A few raised eyebrows. One knowing smile. That was it. Like the first time Chad corrected someone mid-joke. They'd said something half flirty, half dumb. The kind of comment he used to live for. He just smiled and said, "Nah, not my thing anymore." I caught his eye from across the table. He didn't wink, didn't smirk. He just smiled back. We never became the office couple. No grand reveal. No whispered scandal. Life moved on the way it usually does. Emails, deadlines, meetings that could have been emails. But sometimes, when we passed each other in the hallway, he'd brush his fingers against mine for half a second. Just enough to remind me. One night, months later, we were lying in bed. The room quiet except for traffic outside. He was tracing lazy shapes on my arm, something he did without thinking now. "You ever think about how close we came to messing this up?" he asked. "All the time?" I said. He chuckled softly. "I was such an idiot." "You were," I agreed. Then added, "But you stopped being one when it mattered." He turned to look at me. "You could have shut me down way earlier, you know." "I know," I said, "but I needed to see if you'd ever stop hiding behind the joke." He leaned in, kissed my forehead. "I'm done hiding." That's what stuck with me the most. Not the flirting, not the tension, not even the risk. It was the moment he chose honesty over humor. Because sometimes the joke goes too far, and if you're brave enough to stop laughing, you might just find something real underneath.